Welcome, modern day mystics, fellow truth seekers, James and Justin, back again with another reaction video, and we're gonna look at another Koranos video.
All right.
This has to do with Anubis, the Egyptian god. I think Anubis, with my limited knowledge, is the one who kind of like carries you over from the
If I recall correctly, Anubis is the dog-headed god, correct?
Yes.
Few civilizations glorified the dead like the ancient Egyptians. Kings were buried inside giant stone pyramids. Mythical monuments were raised around their tombs, and rituals prepared their souls for a treacherous journey into the afterlife, where a powerful god of death guarded the gates to a utopian sanctuary.
I just wish people were more theatrical. You know, like the guy wearing the Anubis mask, like doing this over a body. I don't care if it does nothing.
Yeah.
I just wish there was more of that. You know, like, we're meeting at Wednesday in the park. Why Wednesday? Because Wednesday's weird. We're meeting at Wednesday at 10 a.m. in cloaks to do a ceremony.
Yeah.
You know, maybe, you know, I'm sure, absolutely certain that like pushes me into a category of weirdo, no, you know, to some sense. But I do like pageantry.
Yeah. One of the thing that stuck out to me was they were talking about back in the day, people used to build these giant like monuments to kings and stuff like that. And in a way, we still do that today.
Yeah.
And I find it so strange that as humans, we're so willing to like put someone on a pedestal and like,
well, yeah,
do so much work.
To me,
for people.
Yes, I wish we were willing to build monuments to ourselves. I wish we were willing to build like a monument to just humanity. We'd probably build a better ass monument, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I'll take what I can get. You know, you look at ancient statues and monuments; they're cool to look at even now.
Yeah.
But yeah, why is it got to be about one? Why do we have to put somebody on a pedestal?
Yeah.
Why don't we put our ingenuity on a pedestal?
But who was the god of death in ancient Egypt? And why was this ancient civilization so invested in the preservation of the dead? The ancient Egyptians believed in the immortality of the soul. Its life on earth was only a pit stop on its journey to a heavenly realm called the Field of Reeds. In the Field of Reeds, the souls of the deceased entered an everlasting paradise, free of sickness, disappointment, and death. According to paintings and engravings in ancient Egyptian tombs, the Field of Reeds was a haven of agriculture. Through its heavenly gates, the souls of the dead walked along the banks of the Nile, slept peacefully under the branches of shady trees, and reaped the rewards of their lives on earth. Similar to Judeo-Christian conceptions of heaven, the Field of Reeds was a peaceful utopia reserved for the good, the just, and the pure of heart.
Notice the pyramids are like white in the pictures.
Yeah.
They're like shimmering. Like, I guess that because they used to be covered in some kind of like shimmering
Maybe
stone.
they painted them. Who knows? I don't remember.
Before anyone could enter the Field of Reeds, souls traveled from their tombs into the afterlife. Most souls traversed the treacherous halls of the underworld on foot, but many kings and pharaohs arrived on handcrafted ships, mimicking the sun god Ra, who sailed into the underworld each time the sun set. Each soul, workers and pharaohs alike, gathered in the Hall of Truth, where they were judged by the Lord of the Underworld, the God of Death. One by one, the God of Death placed their hearts on a golden scale and weighed the goodness of each soul against a white feather of truth. If the soul's heart was heavier than the feather of truth, it fell to the floor, where it was devoured by a god with the head of a crocodile. If its heart was consumed by the crocodile god, the soul ceased to exist. If its heart was lighter than the white feather of truth, the god of death conferred with his council of judges. If the Lord and his council believed the soul to be honest and good, the Lord of the underworld welcomed the pure of heart into the Field of Reeds. There, the souls of the pure would live and prosper for the rest of time. As Lord of the underworld and guardian of the Field of Reeds, the god of death played a critical role in the immortality of ancient Egyptian souls. Few deities in the Egyptian pantheon rivaled the god of death in power or popularity. But who was the god of death in ancient Egypt?
I just wanted to note on heaven, the Egyptian heaven, that for them it was a representation of sustenance, where they got food, where it was what they valued.
Yeah, there was no sickness.
Yeah, it was like the people of the day, they valued those things. And it's interesting to think how the concept of heaven is kind of like it's a little bit different in different religions. In Christianity, they got mansions and streets of gold, which maybe for that time period would have represented, like, imagine for yourself the best thing ever.
Right. So what would it be now? Like, I'm drowning in likes and subscribes.
Yeah. And that was what I was going to ask. I was like, what would, if you could conceptually create for yourself a heaven right now, what would it be?
I suggest doing it.
Yeah.
That is a little practice that I'll write about in my book to come.
Yeah.
No, maybe. But I suggest sitting down when you got time, if you're an imaginative person, and imagining what your heaven would be.
Yeah.
Go nuts. Be like, why? I can imagine anything I want, and try to get in detail. Try to imagine what it would feel like to be, like feeling those fine, fabrics or whatever that you like every last detail of what your heaven would be like.
Yeah.
It's an interesting practice, man.
Yeah.
It'll it makes you understand some things about yourself. It makes you understand some things about the power of outlook.
Yeah. And be as honest with yourself about it as possible, because think about all your carnal desires, all the most carnal
So
things
what there's
about you.
in heaven, there's things that are like Then you get the ball rolling, and you're like, wait a minute. This makes you question, ask things about what heaven is.
Yeah.
And what am I doing here? And wait a sec, I'm completely puppeteered. Why do I even want these things that I would fill my heaven with? Have I just been taught to want those things?
Yep.
What's truest is the whole point.
And where did he come from? From the onset of the first dynasty to the fall of the new kingdom, ancient Egyptians constructed elaborate resting places to honor and protect their dead. To the ancient Egyptians, the desecration of one's body was considered a fate worse than death. If the body was destroyed, the soul was denied entry into the afterlife, never to enter the field of reeds. Many burial sites, however, were plundered by grave robbers, especially the tombs of the rich and powerful. Most kings and queens were buried with treasures from their lives, which would aid them in their journey to the underworld. Unfortunately, their prized possessions attracted the wrong kind of attention. Around 2600 BCE, ancient Egyptians began carving black jackals into the walls of their tombs to scare away grave robbers. These intimidating animals were discovered in pre-dynastic mud brick tombs, towering pyramids, and golden sarcophagi. But why did the ancient Egyptians associate black jackals with death in the afterlife? Jackals, or wild dogs, were ferocious scavengers that roamed the Nile Delta. In the early days of ancient Egypt, starving jackals dug up the bodies of the deceased, destroying ancient burial sites. To ward off these desert gravediggers, the ancient Egyptians made offerings to a jackal-headed god of death called Anubis, or Anpu in ancient Egyptian. His power and influence quickly spread throughout the ancient world. For hundreds of years, Anubis served as protector of departed souls, guardian of cemeteries, and immortal judge presiding over the afterlife. At the tail end of the Old Kingdom, however, Anubis underwent a profound metamorphosis, which began with the discovery of mummification. In the world today, the ancient Egyptians are most famous.
Sometimes when I look at the effort put in, right? Like they built these structures and did all this artwork and developed a whole theology and developed a whole system and all these different things. I think about somebody that is doing that with their own religion that's completely different. And like if their gears start like what if I'm doing that too? Like, look at all the things we can like tell ourselves, the stories and stories that could control people. Like, oh, you better be careful. You better like behave a certain way and do a certain thing. What if none of these things are true, and when you die, none of this happens? There's an awful lot and a variety of things and stories to believe in, whole systems that go like linked with governments.
what was making me think of how we like to keep ourselves busy. And I think we have a misconception sometimes of how things were back in the old days. Like, oh, you worked, from 5 till 9 o'clock at night just to survive. Maybe after they figured out how to do the crops and everything, maybe there wasn't as much work as you think. Maybe they actually lived much more comfortable lives than we did.
Yeah.
They didn't have all the toys and stuff that we had, but their food, they probably had their food, and then they had all this time to fill in the gaps. Or oh, we're gonna die one day, so we have to create a whole bunch of rituals around this to,
Yeah. Let's build meaning. Let's build meaning to this.
What else is there to do?
Yeah. So let's create meaning.
Yeah.
Right? But what happens when you start to realize that all meaning is created? You're like, well, then I can create whatever meaning I want. No, because there's an established meaning, and if you go against that, there's penalties. Yeah. That's just where my mind goes. I was listening to The Alchemist earlier today, and they were talking about the idea of different types of people: the people that know, the people that can learn to know, and the people that ain't gonna know, ain't gonna learn, and don't know.
Yeah.
And sometimes my biggest trepidation and fear is that I'm talking to somebody that's like, shut up. Ugh. I always just hope that anything I say is falling on inquisitive ears that are open to expanding their mind and well, what is next? And I don't even know why I want that, because what if what's next is nothing, is a free fall into, no meaning.
Famous for two things: the pyramids of Giza and the mummies inside them. Ancient Egyptians carefully embalmed dead bodies to protect them from damage and decay, further displaying their respect for the dead. Mummification was revered as a sacred rite passed down by the gods. According to myth, it was invented by Anubis to preserve the body of a god pharaoh named Osiris. In one of ancient Egypt's most famous myths, Osiris was murdered by the jealous god Set, lord of war, storms, and chaos. Osiris was tricked into an affair with Set's wife, the goddess Nephthys, and their union bore a child. When Set discovered the affair, the lord of war flew into a rage. He split Osiris's body into pieces, locked him inside a box, and threw him into the Nile River. Osiris's remains were recovered by his wife Isis. She was desperate to revive her husband, so she brought the god Pharaoh's remains to Anubis, who brought Osiris back to life. Resurrected and empowered, Osiris descended into the underworld, where he became the god, ruler, and judge of the dead. Over time, Osiris replaced Anubis as the ancient Egyptian god of death. Anubis, once the undisputed lord of the underworld, was dethroned, but the jackal god remained a powerful member of the ancient Egyptian pantheon. Anubis acted as the right hand of Osiris and served as the conductor of souls. When a soul awakened in its tomb and read the hieroglyphics etched into the walls, it was Anubis who cared for them and guided them into the sunset. It was Anubis who ushered each soul into the hall of truth to weigh their hearts on a golden scale. Once the god of death, now the conductor of souls, Anubis was a leader, an artist, and a caretaker. How does Anubis compare to death deities from other cultures and religions? In Greek mythology, Hades, the banished son of Kronos, tormented the wicked in a shadowy realm full of monsters and phantoms. In Judeo-Christian scripture, the devil and his demons ruled over a fiery wasteland where evil souls were punished for eternity. Anubis, on the other hand, did not torment or punish the souls of the deceased. The afterlife was not a flaming wasteland or a shadowy realm of suffering and punishment. While ancient Egyptian folklore is rife with vengeance and ferocity, their rich mythology reveals, above all else, justice, preservation, and respect for the dead. No deity encapsulates those values better than the conductor of souls, the first lord of the underworld, the jackal-headed god, Anubis.
I like that term, the conductor of souls. I've always liked Anubis. There's something just kind of cool about Anubis. Yeah. But Yeah, definitely super fascinating there. I had no idea that Anubis was kind of like dethroned by Osiris, though.
I know, and took it with honor and grace.
Yeah,
And plum.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting and cool to see how much they respected and revered, you know, death and the passage, I guess. But super fascinating. And guys, you know, if you liked our reaction to this video, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, share this with a friend, and everybody. Until next time, stay spiritual.